Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're going to be replacing the factory doubled in on this 2018 Nissan Versa. Now in this install we're going to show you how to remove this guy. We'll head over to the bench, show you the new radio and other parts including the dash kit and wiring harness, and we'll come back here and get everything reinstalled. Let's get started. Now, this assembly is very easy on this generation Versa, where essentially up and around the radio, everything is just held in with clips. Once we pop off the dash bezel, just 4 screws are going to be holding the radio in. So, aiding us in our disassembly, I do have a little panel tool, and you can also just use your fingers, but essentially here we just need to get back behind here and start working these clips on loose. So we've gotten this top really loose here. Now at this point, before we pop off the bottom, we do need to remove our air selector, recirculation air selector, little tab there once that's out of the way. Okay, next we need to disconnect the airbag harness and the hazard switch light. One quick thing to note, because this airbag harness is in the bezel, we cannot turn on the key at any point in time with this disconnected, or it's going to trigger the airbag light to pop on the dash and you may have to go to the dealer to remove it. So, harness is unplugged, do not turn on the car. And what I did is I actually just popped the light back out. I'm going to plug it back in just to be safe. Alrighty, so with that now out of the way, that's going to expose for us 4 Phillips screws up and around the radio. Go ahead and remove those. Okay, with those 4 screws removed, go ahead and give the radio a tug. It should come right on out. Now at this point, go ahead and disconnect your harnesses back behind the radio. So with the radio on out, everything disconnected, what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the bench to show you the parts that we're going to need for our install. Alright, so we're here at the bench. Now the parts that we're going to need for the install, first and foremost, is the radio. Customer wants us to install this no-name Chinese Android-based radio, but it does feature Apple Carplay and Android Auto. So to accommodate that in the factory location, we will need some supporting parts. First is the dash kit. This is the 99-7621, features a pocket, so if you want to do a single DIN you can, so this fits both double and single DIN installs. Wiring wise, we need a couple of wiring harness adapters. The first one here is going to be the Scosche NN04B. You can also do the Metro version, it's about the same. And we'll need an antenna adapter, which is the Scosche NAA2B. Again, there's also a Metro version of it as well. We have steering wheel volume controls on our steering wheel that control the radio, so we want to retain those too. So we're using the pack C4RAD, which will retain those buttons and allow us to integrate those to our new aftermarket radio. Finally, a couple of little optional odds and ends. We do have a factory and aux USB in the kind of center console by the cup holders, and if you want to retain those, you do need a USB adapter. It's just a mini USB female to kind of a type A USB end adapter. The pack USB GM1 usually will work perfect in that application, and we can link that down in the description. Also, if you have the aux port and looking to retain it, we'll show you how to just take any sort of aux, modify it, and use it. We'll manually wire that in to retain the factory aux as well. These are the harnesses that plug into the radio itself, and so what we'll need to do from this point forward is we're going to grab our harness adapters for the radio, we're going to grab our wiring harness adapter for the main harness, and the harness that came for the steering wheel volume controls. We're going to start pulling everything apart and getting it manually wired up. Alright, so we got everything pulled apart here for our wiring. So again, these are the harnesses that connect to the back of the radio, and this harness connects into the main harness of the vehicle, the main radio harness. Now our accessories that we're adding, like the steering wheel volume controls, we pull that harness out here and strip both ends back. Now we have a great video on the channel that walks you through how to integrate steering wheel volume controls to an aftermarket radio using this type of harness, but we'll just cover what connections you have to make in this video specifically. Finally, we also have our antenna adapter that also requires power to power the amplified circuit on the antenna itself for better reception. This does look intimidating, but we're going to go through all these connections so it makes it a little easier for you at home. Essentially here we're going to match color for color. This is our speaker harness. A lot of these on these Android units aren't matched perfectly to kind of the industry standard, so we'll have to double check whatever we're connecting is indeed correct. Generally, if you have a big brand name radio like Pioneer, Sony, Alpine, Kenwood, etc., it will be for the most part color for color. In our steering wheel control harness, we're going to need 5 of the 7 wires. There's going to be a red as power, there's going to be 2 blacks as 2 grounds, and then there's going to be a solid white and a white black. That's what we've started with. We've stripped both ends. We're going to be soldering here today. We'll put heat shrink on our wiring before we make those connections. If you don't know how to solder, we suggest using butt connectors like these, or even better, crimp caps. Just don't twist and tape or use wire nuts, as they're not designed for an automotive application. Okay, so what we're going to do is start preparing our harness. With our heat shrink, we're going to start soldering everything up, and then we will go over those connections here in a bit. Alright, so we went ahead and soldered everything up. Now, to get started here, we have our 4 speakers, our whites, greens, grays, and purples. Those match up for color. Obviously, each one of those pairs have a negative wire, which is indicated by the black stripe. So those speaker wires are all done. Those were super easy to do, color for color. Constant power is yellow, black is going to be your ground, red's going to be your accessory, and this is where this one differs. Illumination on this guy happens to be this green, but on the harness itself it is orange-white, so we made that connection there and verified that that was the right wire. Our steering wheel control module, this harness that goes into that little brain box, that needs power and ground, and from the instructions when we go to the PAX website and go to the C4RAD programming page, it does indicate that we can either grab our accessory 12 volts here at the main harness, or we can do it in the secondary harness as well, multiple places where you can find it. So we went ahead and grabbed our power and ground for our harness adapter here. We just tied our red accessory in. As you can see, we have multiples there. We also left another one off in case we had a backup camera accessory or anything down the road. We'll just cap that off. So we just teed into that. Same thing with ground for this guy. We just teed into that ground as well. Now, speaking of grounds on Nissans, Nissans for the longest time have not actually grounded their radios through the harness. They ground it through the chassis of the radio, or commonly through the antenna. So if you ever install one of your radios and they don't turn on, more than likely it's because you have a ground issue. Now, one thing I like about our SWRNS version of this harness adapter, it comes with a ring terminal here, which will ground to the chassis back behind the radio. Nice thing is this ring terminal is ready to go. It runs in parallel with all the other black wires, so you don't have to make any other special connections besides just grounding that to metal chassis back behind the radio. Our antenna adapter, the solid blue, we just tied it into our antenna wire of our radio. If your radio doesn't have a specific antenna blue output, you can tie it into accessory, that's fine. You can tie it into the amp turn-on, which is blue-white. Now finally, for steering wheel controls, most radios, when you set this up, require a connection between this and the actual radio itself. It comes with this harness. It does have a couple of options the way this hook this up. This blue with yellow stripes, generally for Kenwoods or JVCs, and then this 3.5 millimeter jack type looking plug here. It's not an aux. That goes to the wired remote input on the back of the radio. Now, if your radio doesn't have this, we have these just from ASWC1s as an extra harness. It converts this into a 2-wire, so we actually don't have to cut and modify this. On our radio, it has a key 1, key 2, so we're going to go ahead, before we solder this in, do some testing to ensure that we have them hooked up correctly. Finally, with those steering wheel controls, besides power and ground, there's 3 additional wires that we have to snag in the harness back behind the radio. We'll show you where we need to hook these up later. Now, I do want to make one quick note. There is a simpler solution in terms of a harness. These are a lot of manual connections, but it does save us a little bit of money. There's a premium harness adapter, or multiple out there, that will do all these special connections for you, and you don't have to necessarily run extra wiring anywhere, and we'll link those harnesses down in the description of the video. So at this point of time, we're going to move our heat shrink up and over our connections here, and we're going to shrink them down with a heat gun. Alright, so we went ahead and got everything heat shrunk and ready to go. Remember, these 3 wires we'll have to make separately within the vehicle itself. Unfortunately, they are not pinned within this harness adapter itself, so we'll have to manually make those connections elsewhere in the main harness adapter. There are some that provide that. Generally, Scosche and Metro don't, unfortunately. We did some testing with our steering wheel volume controls for key 1 and key 2. And so we got those all soldered in there, as so this will plug into our pack harness adapter here. Now we like to test the tape just to get everything cleaned up here. We are basically done with our wired connections here at the bench, and then we need to turn our attention over to our dash kit. Alright, so we went ahead and finished up our harness here. This end plugs into the radio. Got everything tested taped here. Here's the 3 wires for our steering wheel controls that we'll have to make that special connection. We have our antenna adapter here. That's all done as well. That goes into the antenna input. That plugs into the car. Goes into the amplified circuit. We have an extra accessory off in case we had like a backup camera down the road. We left our backup camera trigger wire out as well. And we are basically done. We have a ring terminal. Now again, this is only optional if the wire is not pinned in your harness. Later model Nissans, generally you can find one there. Earlier model Nissans, no, it's not there. So you may need that ring terminal. We got everything zip tied for our dip switches. We went to the website, set our dip switches there. We'll put all this information down below so you know how to set your dip switches. We'll have to make just the last 3 connections once we're in the vehicle itself. So we'll set this guy off to the side. Our next thing here is we got our dash kit all done here. Now, I really don't like these Android-based radios. The holes never line up. There are a couple of them that I suggest, like the Joybring radios, they do. The Android-based ones, these ones don't. So I have to go through and manually cut and shave and to get that to fit. So you can still have access to the USB and buttons without it not fitting. It's just not a great fit. It's just not a perfect doubled-in size for standard doubled-in dash kits. But we got it to work with making our own hole. So with the dash kit and wire harness all done, let's head to the car, make our final connections, and get this radio installed. Alright, so we're back here in the car. We connected this temporarily, our harness adapter. Now remember, our 3 wires for steering wheel controls, they're not located here in the harness. We have to go back behind the harness, unfortunately. Now these 3 wires need to connect into this harness. I want to show you which one goes where. What we've done here is just strip back the wire. Using our wire strippers, we didn't break the copper connection. We just stripped back the shielding so we have space to solder onto that. So the order for which we make our connections, gray is going to black, brown is going to be white, and then this violet purple is going to be white black. So we're going to match our colors. Now we strip those back and put little loops in that, in the wire. We're going to feed and thread our wire through that, and we're going to solder on to that connection. Alright, so we soldered on those connections for our 3. Gray to black, brown to white, violet to white black. We're going to tape up those connections. Alright, so we taped up our connections there. We're going to throw some tested tape on there to hold everything together. Now, if you want to also retain your aux from your aux port down below, that little aux guy, you can. And in the 32-pin harness over here, you're going to have a these 3 guys, these 3 wires. Right's going to be blue, yellow is going to be left, and ground is going to be green. And same principle, stripped it back, we're going to solder on, and we just put a little plug in here. And we'll hook that up to our radio to retain the aux port. Now the USB, same principle. It's going to have this guy here, and our USB connector will connect into that to the back of the radio. So at this point of time, we're going to reluna our harnesses, and it's time to get the radio reinstalled. All right, so with our wires connected for our steering wheel controls, the 3 wires we need, let's go ahead and install our harness adapter. Get that plugged on in. Now, I actually noticed that our black ground has a factory ground. In this model year Versa, we have a ground. If you didn't, This little ring terminal, you just find some bare metal. You can use one of these screws and you'd go ahead and mount it in place. In our case, since we don't need it, we don't need to hook it up. We've already set our dip switches for this, so we're going to just tack this down into the dash. Next here, let's grab our USB adapter and plug that on in as well. Okay, and finally, we can grab our radio and start making our connections. Before we get everything buttoned up, let's do a test.
And I've got where we'll be.
Okay, it all seems to be working great. Volume controls are working up and down. Because we have an Android radio, you don't automatically have a set button layout. You actually have to go in and manually program, which we've done. At this point of time, everything's looking great. Let's go ahead and finish reinstalling the dash. We are done here. Volume up, volume control down, control, steering wheel controls. We did a backup camera. That's all working great. We retained our aux and USB adapter below as well. If you want to see more on what we did here, we did a backup camera here. We can link that video down in the description, which walks you through step by step on how to integrate a camera to this radio. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you like what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time, and we'll see you in the next video.